We're living in a time where people are more connected than ever, yet lonelier than ever. Everyone talks about the loneliness crisis, but no one really talks about how to make friends. I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a self-help guru, I'm just someone who's been lucky enough to build deep, decade-long friendships. And I've learned that it's not magic, it's intention. This is Friendships Unplugged, where we stop scrolling and start talking. Real stories, real friendships, good laughs, insights and no filters. Welcome and enjoy.
Hi, my name is Iris and I'm the founder of the podcast called Friendships Unplugged. Why did I decide to found the podcast is very simple. I have come across in recent years so many statements and articles around the world loneliness crisis. 25 to 29% of 18 to 29-year-olds feel lonelier than older generations. The WHO has declared social connection as priority to avoid a mental health crisis. It seems a lot of people, a lot of studies talk about loneliness as a priority, as a problem to solve. So the world seems to agree that we have a problem, yet it bothered me so much that there is very little out there on how to address the problem. If you Google books and podcasts and articles and TikToks on romantic love, on business relationships, even on family dynamics. There is so much material out there, yet there is almost nothing on friendships. So I went on a quest to look for podcasts on friendships, dedicated podcast to the topic of friendship. And I found one. There is a nice woman talking about friendships among Christian women. And whilst this is a great start, I'm thinking, wow, that's such a niche. So why are not more people talking about this? If we all seem to agree that it's such an important problem to address, it's such an important thing for people to get educated about, that people to have on top of their mind. And after thinking about the problem and the solution and having many conversations over the past years, I decided to try and do something against it. I'm new at this. I haven't done a podcast before, and I'm not doing this for visibility or anything, but really I see this as a social mission that we have as a society. This podcast is a small attempt to do my part. Now, what makes me qualified to do a podcast on friendships? Probably not a lot of things. I've been working in technology for the past 20 years and I studied business. So I'm not a trained psychologist, nor have I had any formal education on kind of people dynamics and so on. But I've been a human walking this planet for 41 years and I've lived in 4 different countries. And I learned a thing or two about people. Looking back to the topic of friendship, the one thing that I started to realize and to think deeper about is I seem to have a lot of friendships compared to most people I talk to. And I started to think why that is. And well, it certainly plays into the cards that I lived in different countries and I met a lot of people and I had an interest to keep in touch and build these relationships deeper. But there seems to be something there. Now, I'm not sure I'm able to provide the answers in a scientific way, but what I hope to do with this podcast is to share the lived experience, because there seem to be a lot of misperceptions out there about friendship. When I talk to people at work or people that I met or also have deeper conversations with about the topic, it seems to be that there is very little facts about friendships. I've come across a lot of people who seem to have a Hollywood image of friendships in their mind. So it's almost like Hollywood thoughts about romantic relationships. They seem to think, well, if I have a friend, they have to be there for me 24/7. They have to tick all my boxes and so on. And it got me thinking, well, how is it possible that people think of this almost like, oh, it hasn't come to me yet, it hasn't fallen into my lap yet, this perfect friend, so I guess I'm just a bit lonely then. And it strikes me, no one can argue, we are living in the most dense time when it comes to social media, and yet we didn't seem to have figured out what the recipe for success is. What is a friendship? How should a friendship look like? What's a healthy friendship? How do I build friendships? What do I get from friendships? How much do I need to put in, etc.? However, another thing that we unanimously seem to agree on is that friendships are crucial and very, very important for mental health. So again, my big question, how come we're not talking more about this? So if we all seem to agree that it's such a big issue, why are we not addressing the issue? So anyway, having been lucky to have met a lot of friends and counting a lot of close friends as my blessing, I figured the format for this podcast is really to share the lived experience. There's going to be a lot of stories, how people meet, ups and downs of friendships. There is hopefully the occasional accidental nugget of wisdom in there as well. There's certainly going to be a lot of laughs, but hopefully by sharing this lived experience on how different friendships can look, hopefully by this I can inspire some people to think about friendships themselves on a deeper level, in a way that maybe encourages them to put themselves more out there, to rethink what they consider friendships, and maybe pick up on a friendship that was left to be again, or re-inject some energy into existing dynamics to bring people closer, to really experience those beautiful benefits of friends. I grew up in a sometimes emotionally immature household, shall we say. And obviously I was small then, but something in me realized very early that friendships are absolutely crucial for my well-being, for my survival, for my happiness in life. I started very early to build strong friendships and looking after them like a family. I guess I was lucky that I had this intrinsic wisdom somehow, because I count myself very fortunate to look back on many, many years of psychological safe friendships where I could learn to truly be myself and learn things from and get feedback on issues that I had or big questions in life, people that celebrate wins with me. And I want to share that. So the format of the podcast, every 2 weeks there's another episode with a new friend. Over time there's going to be certain friends that will come back for more conversations on the topic. I also consciously chose not to go for a fancy podcast studio or anything, because we're living in a time where everything is too artificial, too superficial, too AI anyway. And I feel that's an important part of why people struggle forming friendships, because friendships is about realness between two people. It's about rawness. It's about imperfection. It's about falling in love with a person despite their flaws, despite they may not share every single interest that you have. But we as people, we need friction to grow. I'm always thinking, if I don't have my friends who give me honest feedback, whether or not it's good or bad, who will give that to me? Who will teach me to go back and think again about a certain opinion or perspective I have? How will I gain new insights if I circulate in the same social media bubble that constrains to all my boxes ticked? How will I develop as a person if I don't get that intellectual and emotional friction with people? And you only get that if there is quite a high level of trust, if there is vulnerability. That's why I chose to not have a full-blown studio. In fact, these podcasts are being recorded in our upstairs living room, and there's going to be very little editing involved because I want the conversations to be real and raw. And I want the listeners to feel like they're literally sitting in that round of friendships. So by sharing the lived experience, hopefully people get an idea of what friendships can look like in all their shapes and forms, and what the benefit is of putting yourself out there, being a bit vulnerable and daring to connect to people on a level that may result into a friendship later. Now, another thing that comes to mind when we talk about friendships is we're living in a time where I think 2 out of 3 marriages get divorced or something like that. However, we live in a time where a lot of marriages get divorced and split up. So meaning that our partner for life may not necessarily be our partner for our entire life, and compared to the earlier days. Now, when I think about my friends, they play a very important role in terms of what 20, 30 years ago a marriage would have done. And in happy marriages, these roles are still fulfilled by your romantic partner. But if you think about marriage, it often is about sharing your life with someone. Because if we don't have someone who witnesses our life and whose life we witness in return, who are we? Like, it makes us feel insignificant on this planet. What does our life matter if there's no one that we can share it with? In times where romantic love and marriages are not as stable as they used to be, friends often are the only partners that share very long periods of our life with us. There is that whole psychological benefit of witnessing someone develop, that I can watch someone grow and develop and even change for the better as a person, and to have someone who does the same with me. And it's something beautiful. I want to share some of those stories with you. Hopefully you'll find that inspiring. I will try and answer all of your questions and comments as we start to take off with this project. And I appreciate that you are tolerant for the little imperfections in this podcast, because again, it's about realness and not polishedness and perfection. Because guess what? Friendships are the same. They're not perfect. They are fantastic and nourishing and inspiring, but there is going to be periods where, there is downs, there is, disappointments, life coming in the way, you haven't got time to meet one another as often as you would like. Imperfect. Like life. Hopefully, this podcast will inspire you to go out there, find yourselves some new friends, reconnect with existing ones, go to deeper levels on that friendship rather than having superficial conversations only. Dare to be yourself in these friendships. It's beautiful and it's rewarding and it's healthy. If you like this content, follow the show and find us on social media. See you there.